Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're asking a really special question. Why exactly did Jesus Christ come and why did he die?
It's fundamental. We've gone through a lot of theological material, biblical text, trying to piece together the core reasons.
Right, so the goal here is to understand the necessity behind it all and, what it actually achieved. For you listening, what's the impact?
Exactly. We need to look at sin, God's nature, the old systems, the prophecies. It all connects.
Okay, let's start with sin then. Our sources say it's more than just messing up occasionally.
Yeah, definitely. It's framed as rebellion, like fundamentally choosing our way over God's way against a perfectly holy God.
And it's not just individual acts, is it? There's this idea of an inherent condition.
A sin nature passed down. It affects everyone universally. And the core consequence is separation.
Separation from God, that sounds serious.
It is. The texts talk about spiritual death, physical death, and ultimately eternal separation. It's a fracture in the created order.
So, here's the question many ask. If God is loving and all-powerful, why couldn't he just, wipe the slate clean? Just forgive.
That's where God's character comes in. The sources really highlight his holiness. His absolute purity means he cannot abide sin. And his justice. Well, justice demands that wrongdoing has a consequence.
So, he can't just ignore it without violating his own nature.
Precisely. Ignoring sin would contradict his truthfulness, his justice. It creates this divine tension. How can he be both just and loving in the face of rebellion?
Which leads us to the Old Testament sacrifices, maybe. How did they fit in?
They were a temporary measure
Sure.
provided by God for atonement, covering sin, allowing worship, fellowship.
And the blood was significant.
Very. It represented life given, a substitute. But, crucially, the sources like Hebrews emphasize these animal sacrifices weren't enough. They had to be repeated. They were pointing forward.
Pointing forward to a better sacrifice, to a redeemer.
Exactly. The Old Testament is filled with whispers, prophecies about someone coming, and interestingly, not always the conquering hero people expected.
Like Isaiah 53.
Yes, the suffering servant, despised, rejected, bearing our pain, pierced for our wrongdoing. It's strikingly substitutionary.
And Psalm 22 as well. It sounds incredibly like crucifixion.
It's uncanny. The description of the suffering, the thirst, the divided garments, even the cry of feeling forsaken. And Daniel talks about an anointed one being cut off.
So the stage was set for Jesus. Why him specifically? Why God becoming man?
That's key. He had to be fully human to truly represent us, to stand in our place, but also fully God for the sacrifice to have infinite value, enough to cover all sin for all time.
So his death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a transaction, a substitution.
The substitutionary atonement, yes. He took the penalty we deserve. It satisfied God's justice, fulfilling the demands of his holy law.
And demonstrated his love simultaneously.
Immensely. Romans 5.8 puts it powerfully. God shows his love in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Justice and love meet at the cross.
Okay, so what did his coming, death, and resurrection actually accomplish? What changed?
Well, quite a lot, actually. Reconciliation is huge. The relationship with God, broken by sin, could be restored.
And freedom from sin.
Redemption, yes. Freedom from its penalty, its guilt, even its power in a believer's life. Plus, victory over death itself. The resurrection proves that. And victory over Satan's claims.
And establishing the new covenant you mentioned.
Right. A new relationship based not on external laws primarily, but on God's law, written on the heart, enabled by his Spirit.
Now let's talk about the Holy Spirit. We see the Spirit in the Old Testament too, don't we?
We do. Active in creation, giving life, empowering specific people for specific tasks. Judges, prophets, kings.
But there was a difference.
A key difference the sources point out. Often in the Old Testament, the Spirit would come upon someone, sometimes temporarily, for a task. It wasn't usually described as a permanent internal dwelling for all God's people.
So Jesus' work changed the Spirit's role.
Absolutely. Jesus promised the Holy Spirit would come after him as a comforter, a helper, dwelling within believers. His finished work, death, resurrection, ascension, cleared the way.
It is finished. That wasn't just about his suffering ending.
No, it was a declaration of completion. Atonement made, the price paid. His high priestly work was beginning, the enemy defeated. It paved the way for the Spirit's new ministry.
Which kicked off at Pentecost.
Exactly. That outpouring of the Spirit was the fulfillment of prophecy, the inauguration of this new era. Now, the Spirit permanently indwells every believer.
And that indwelling presence does what?
So much. regenerates us, gives new spiritual life, sanctifies us, makes us more like Christ, empowers us for service, guides us into truth, assures us we're God's children, unites us into the church. It's a completely different level of relationship.
Wow. Okay, so pulling it all together, it's this incredibly coherent story. Sin creates the problem. God's character necessitates a just and loving solution. The Old Testament hints and prepares. Jesus is the solution, and the Holy Spirit applies that solution personally.
That's a great summary. It's one unfolding plan of redemption. The ultimate goal, you could say, is at one-ment, literally making God and humanity at one again, restoring that broken relationship.
It's quite profound when you see all the pieces connect like that.
It really is.
So for you listening, maybe just sit with that for a moment. This whole comprehensive plan, how does understanding this interconnected story shape how you see God or how you see your own life within that story? What part resonates most, or what questions does it maybe spark for you to explore further? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.